All right, so hang on actually. Pause. So welcome to the second installment of my random video tutorials in music technology. And this one is for Mary. Mary wanted to know, excuse me, Mary wanted to know more about EXS24 and Ultrabeat. So since both of these plugins are quite extensive and complex, I cannot really cover them in one tutorial or even 10. So I'm just going to do a few tricks and tips in one of them today, and then hopefully Mary will have more specific questions and I'll be able to answer them in a little bit more concise way. Let's see, EXS24, in order for it to function, you have to have a software instrument track, and then you load it up. For me, it shows up as a default, but for you, it may not. So what you want to do is locate it under your instruments. You want to choose the stereo for now. I will be talking about the multi-output and the 5.1 at some other point. So the main thing to understand about this is, I think, obviously, two things. One is that you can choose from a variety of sampler instruments that are available with Logic or other plugins that you might have on your computer or in your library folder. And you can also modify those to make them more your own, which is a big thing for me. Not using things as they come, but making them unique in some way. And also you can create your own instruments, which I think is the biggest advantage of samplers in general. However, it is something that requires quite a lot of time to do well. All right, so let's talk about a few ways to do that. All right, so I've downloaded a couple of things here for you, or uploaded rather, so that we can work through this with some content that's pre-recorded, but obviously you can have your own content, you can sing, you can record your instrument, a whole ensemble. The procedure will be somewhat the same, with some specifics depending on the kind of materials that you are working with. So this is a little synth loop that I've uploaded, that I've downloaded from Splice, and it actually lists the tempo information. Very good thing for loops to, or audio files, to mention the the tempo information in them. Also good for you to remember to do that when you're filing your own sounds and creating your own sound library. Please do yourself a favor and make a note of tempo. It will make it a lot easier to edit and sync with any project. So this one was listed to be in a 140 beats per minute, which I can just match to a sequence here, and each of these notes occupies beat. 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes it easy to edit, cut, upload to a sampler, and any of those things. So I'm going to use a very simple technique for this one because I can. So I'm going to control click on this track that I've just downloaded, that I've just uploaded, on this audio file rather, and I'm going to choose a preset utility here called Convert to New Sampler Track. Super useful. And then it's going to ask me which distribution, which cutting technique do you want me to use? And I'm going to say, okay, you're suggesting here transient markers, and that sounds good to me because the transients are what begins each note. So that is useful here because there's just a note on each beat, so that's just going to work fine. And what I want to check here is what the name of the instrument will be, and I'm okay with the name of the file because the file already was saved with a nice name to it. But please be careful when you're saving your own files not to leave them named as audio 1 or audio 750. Give them the name that consists of the description, the tempo information, and if possible the key or the pitch information. It's which all of it is included here, 140 C#. And then in this area here, you want to tell it the mapping technique. So it tells you here that this is in C#. So I'm assuming that C# is the first note of the sequence. I don't have perfect pitch. If you do, good for you. If you don't, there is another utility to help you here, so I'll get to that in a minute also. So basically, I'm going to match that note here to this note here, which they're going to coincide. So in other words, my first note, the first note of this sequence or this audio file will land on a C3 in this case, which I'm changing to be a C#, so that the C#, triggered C# will produce a recorded C# note. The rest of it, we're going to actually have to manually remap, but for now I'm going to leave it as it is because the sequence is skipping some notes. It's not in order. I'm going to say OK. Miraculously, now we have a MIDI transcription. All right, so now that we have this transcription, we also have more flexibility that we did not necessarily have with our audio file, and that is playing those notes on a MIDI keyboard. So you can play them in a different sequence. I don't have my MIDI keyboard here, so I'm going to go with my nice and colorful musical typing thing. And where is that? Where is that? Here. Yes? Now, another thing that I want to point out here, and I can't really cover it in this tutorial anymore today, because I spent most of my day figuring out how to make the screen flow to work and some other functions of recording these tutorials, and I am a little bit tired to finish this properly, so I will do that in a few days. But I just want to point out two things. One is that if you listen to this, this is pretty much, this is most likely really a C# as Logic had promised, or Splice has promised when labeling the sound file. But this is not a D#. This is more like a G#. So this is a G#, and this is a C#, so is this. So what we need to do is if we want to really use this in a smarter way, we need to retune some of the notes in here. So this is a C#, that this trigger is a D# and not a G#, that this trigger is another C# and not a G natural, and so on. And all of that is possible in our editor, which you can access just by double-clicking on an instrument and clicking on an edit. And so C# is C#, but if you play this note, you see how it triggers a D#, but in fact it sounds like a G#, so that needs reorganizing. And this is a G, triggered by a G, and it sounds like a C#, so all of that is something that you need to spend more time on, and this is where it becomes a little confusing and a little bit time-consuming, but really worth the effort, because this is how you get to customize sound libraries, and you can turn your library around to cover a lot more grounds than you think it does. A lot of people would just go ahead and buy everything that's out in the market, but for those of us who live on a budget and create on a budget, you spend more time, but you learn more, and sometimes you just come up with some great solutions that you wouldn't have experienced otherwise. But just like one last thing before I wrap this up for today is, which is pretty easy, is that you can easily transpose any of those samples just by dragging these zones to either direction. In other words, just by extending this assignment that was originally only a C# assignment, I'm now able to produce all these different variations of the notes. And if you go lower, you get weirder and weirder sounding transpositions. The notes also become longer, which is just the nature of acoustics. Similarly, going upwards, you get shorter, more percussive notes, but the transposition is perfect. So you can get away with a few transpositions in either direction and still be in the spirit of an instrument, or if you really are into creating weird sounds and these transposing things, overlapping things, can help you create beautiful textures. That you can explore to your heart's content. Now we're gonna get, yeah, I can't even stop myself from like creating weird. All right, so Mary, please give me some more specific questions about what you want covered in terms of EXS24 and Ultra Deep. Otherwise, I'm going to go on with this tutorial and several more that I always teach at Juilliard and that I have to many times repeat so many times that I feel like it would be a good thing for everybody to have a reference tutorial to go to. Thanks, everyone. Bye.